everyone. So I'm here with Dr. Daniel Wilson from the channel Debunk the Funk, where he's here to answer any COVID or vaccine questions you have. That I relate to his field, obviously, and maybe even more so. I don't know. We'll see. So I don't know. Would you like to say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone. It's good to be here. It's fun to answer COVID questions, and I'm looking forward to it.
So, and yes, Amber will be here as soon as she can. She has like four kids, I think, and
Oof.
a set of twins, and they're
Oh
all
my
like
God.
they're all like 15 and younger. So, like a couple of them are really young. So she's got her hands full until her husband gets home. So
Yeah, that's rough. I have one little one, and she's
I know.
she's so much of a handful. I can't imagine four. What are you
So
doing?
how
What are
how,
you thinking?
how old is she now?
She's 4 months right now,
Oh my God, dude,
and
guys, he's a first time dad.
I am, yeah. It's an experience, but it's amazing and tough and a learning process all at the same time. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I tell you, especially at that age, what I learned the most is every time you get settled into a routine, they go and change it up on you, like every
yeah,
time.
we've experienced that already.
Yeah.
She does her own thing, and we have to just react to it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I know that the chat here probably has a lot of questions, but before I want to let everyone know in chat know I am going to be looking over there and and asking your questions and everything. But to start with, I thought that we would cover much of the questions asked in the two posts I made regarding the stream. I think that that's a good place to start, and I noticed that a lot of people have a lot of the same concerns.
Hmm.
So, um, I thought where we could start there, and this is a good question. I thought someone had asked, is natural immunity winning over the vaccine? And I think what they mean by that is natural immunity proving to be more effective than the vaccine immunity?
Right. Yeah. I've heard that talked about a lot. And so here's a way to think about this. If you get naturally infected with COVID, it's essentially like getting a really big dose of vaccine, of live virus vaccine.
Right.
So it makes sense that you're going to have a more robust immune response to a huge dose of live virus vaccine as opposed to a relatively smaller dose of a non full virus vaccine, right? Because that's
Right.
what the AstraZeneca, Johnson and Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna, all those vaccines are not the full virus.
Right.
So it makes sense that you're going to have a more robust immune response to a live infection than a vaccine. That's standard across all vaccines.
Right.
The question is that worth the risk? And
It,
yeah,
exactly.
the answer is no, it's not worth the risk because if you get vaccinated, you're still getting really robust protection, but you're not having all the risk of a live infection, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's what I've noticed. I mean, obviously, I think we've all noticed people who do get sick. I mean, yeah, the vast majority of them, survive it and and even just move on and thrive, after it. But a good percentage don't. So,
yeah. Hmm.
is it worth it? Is it worth the risk? Exactly.
Right. And it's not just like the risk. We'll probably talk more about this as the stream goes on, but it's not just the risk to you. It's also the
Right.
risk that you pose to other people. So if you get infected and you get sick with it, you're going to have a good chance of spreading it to others.
Right. Okay.
Even if you don't develop symptoms, you can still spread it asymptomatically. And
Right. Okay.
the vaccine does reduce the chance of you transmitting it. So it's not just about you when it comes to infectious disease, it's about your community. So you have to weigh that if you're on the fence about getting vaccinated. You have to not just think about yourself, you have to think about your community. So
Yeah. Yeah. I
that's
would imagine
important to
it.
consider.
Yeah, I would imagine it's hard not to think about others than your people other than yourself. I mean, we all have loved ones, family or friends or whatever. And I mean, even if they're not, if none of them are like immunocompromised, they're still loved ones. I mean, how can you not consider them? So, someone in chat though asked about your background, and I think that's a good thing to discuss.
Oh yeah, so right. So I'm a PhD scientist. I got my PhD at Carnegie Mellon University, and while I was there, I studied a field called ribosome assembly. So it's ribosomes. If you remember from way back from like high school biology, you learned about them at some point.
Vaguely,
They're the things that make protein in your cells.
Okay.
But they're actually really complex nano-machines that the cell has to build, and they have to build it properly. So I studied that process. So yeah, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a virologist, but I've always been passionate about science communication. So I've always been aware of anti-vaccine sentiments, anti-vaccine ideas, like all of that stuff. I've always been aware of it, and I've always taken it upon myself to learn about those claims and the science behind them, whether or not they're correct. So yeah, I earned my PhD, and I'm just a normal scientist that's really interested in science communication. So I spend a lot of time learning about stuff that's not necessarily my field.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I would even argue that if you have any kind of advanced education in science, then I would think that your ability to understand other fields, because there's fundamentals, I think, across like a lot of sciences, especially upon like reading about sciences or studies or trials. And that's something I think the understanding of how to read that kind of just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Across the board,
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, part of earning a PhD is you have to learn how to learn. You have to learn how to read science in fields that are, tangential to your field, because you're always encouraged to like pull ideas from neighboring fields and try to get creative with your own projects and stuff. So learning how to like look at a paper and assess it quickly, determine what the data are and how good they are and how they got it. That's all part of our training. So
yeah.
And
but
I just want to make it clear. Sorry, I just want to make it clear that I'm not a virologist or epidemiologist. That's important to state. But
I hear you.
I learn from virologists and epidemiologists as much as I can.
There you go. Yeah, that's something that we don't have the opportunity. Most people don't, anyways. I mean, not without actively seeking it out hard. But since you bring that up, I would also like to point out to anyone watching this is not medical advice. This is not meant to replace any medical advice or provide any medical advice. Any medical questions you have regarding yourself, you should always speak to your doctor, because we're not doctors. So thank you for that. Thanks for reminding me. Okay, so another one of the questions someone asked, and I think that this is an important question. I think that, or the answer could be important, because I think this would cover like all vaccines even. But someone asked, does the vaccine stay in your body?
No, it doesn't. So when we refer to the vaccine, there are a couple vaccines on the market. There are the mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. There are the vector vaccines from Janssen and AstraZeneca. And whatever the case, they don't stay in your body. So they're composed of whichever vaccine you're talking about, they're composed of biological materials that your body is going to metabolize over time. So if we just take the mRNA vaccine, for example, what's going to happen is it's mRNA encapsulated in lipid nanoparticles. And that word sounds, that term sounds scary, but it's just the same stuff that your cell membranes are made of. It's fats.
Right.
Essentially.
I was just going to say it's fats. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the reason is that those lipid nanoparticles, that are made of fats are going to fuse with your cell membranes, which are made of fats. And after it fuses, it's going to deliver the mRNA into your cells. And your cells, remember, they naturally make mRNA all the time. It's a part of gene expression. So, millions, billions of copies of mRNA are constantly being made in your cells.
So, and the one thing I hear often about is how this is the mRNA vaccine. This is something new. It's something unknown, but the I don't know, the material in which it delivers to your body already naturally makes. Would that be an accurate thing to say? Okay.
So the using mRNA vaccines as a technology is relatively new when it comes to like products that we actually use. But it's been studied for at least 30 years. It's been in the pipeline for a very long time. It just now had an opportunity because they're so easy to make and COVID was such a pressing problem that pharmaceutical companies actually said, let's invest in this. Let's actually take the opportunity to make mRNA vaccines, because the alternatives would be, waiting a few months to have like a protein vaccine or another kind of vector vaccine. They just take longer to design, longer to make. But an mRNA vaccine can literally be ready to test after like over a weekend. That was the really big perk that they had. So it's a relatively new technology in terms of how much we use it, but it's been studied for a very long time. It's well understood. And mRNA is something that cells make all the time. So it's not like we discovered it a few years ago, So
it's I think it was Dr. Peter Hotez. He had said, this was like way back in the beginning of the whole shutdown, the whole pandemic and everything, like over a year ago. He was saying that we were already very close to having a vaccine for coronaviruses, and that he and his team they had just gotten to the point where they were ready to begin, trial on humans, but then funding dried up, and then there was no sense of urgency. If there's no sense of urgency, there's no money being thrown at it. So it just kind of stalled, and then Corona happened, and then poof, all this money starts getting thrown at it. And I think that he was explaining how so much of this work in technology has already been done. So
exactly, Peter Hotez, he's a professor of tropical diseases down in I think Houston, Texas. He's been a really active communicator during the COVID-19 pandemic, and his lab has made a lot of vaccines themselves. And you're right, they were close to making a SARS-1 vaccine, back when that was a threat. But because SARS-1 couldn't spread as well as SARS-2, it kind of fizzled. And then pharmaceutical companies were like, well, why are we going to invest billions of dollars? Because that's how much it takes to get these vaccines to market. Why are we going to invest billions of dollars to continue making a vaccine, continue testing a vaccine that against a virus that has fizzled? It's not spreading anymore. So, efforts were just kind of thrown in the trash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, better to have than what was there than nothing, I guess. But
that research wasn't lost or anything. It definitely helped us to make a SARS-2 vaccine faster.
Right.
It's just a shame that we didn't have coronavirus vaccines before this, or else it might have been even faster. Who knows?
So one other question was, someone had wrote a very long comment, and they mentioned the developer of the mRNA vaccine having concerns about potential long-term consequences, especially in fertility. And the question I think there was, is there enough data to know how the spike proteins will react or where they will accumulate in the human body?
Yeah, so I'm assuming the person who posted this comment is talking about Robert Malone as the creator of mRNA vaccines.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so if you watch a recent video on my channel, debunking Dr. Sean Brooks is the video. I have a chart there showing exactly what Robert Malone did in the context of creating mRNA vaccines. So what he did is he published one paper back in 1989, which was trying to develop a way to, it was the lipid nanoparticle part of the vaccine. He was working on that technology, right? But if you look at there's a screenshot in my video of this chart that I have. That's one step of, I think it's probably close to like 20 different papers, different steps that were required in actually making an mRNA vaccine successful. And he had nothing to do with any of the other steps. So he's kind of lying when he says that he's the creator of mRNA vaccines. It's not fair at all to credit him with that. It's like the analogy I use is like if you credit the person who invented the light bulb with also inventing like LED lights or computer screens. It's like, no, that doesn't work. There are many steps in between those two things. So that's exactly the case here. So he's not the inventor. He's not the creator of mRNA vaccines. He's just not.
Yeah, I would even argue that it could be kind of comparable to, say, I don't know, Louis Pasteur or whatever, having questions about vaccines in the future because without having any of the knowledge in which to, formulate an opinion or whatever accurately. I mean, if he wasn't a part of all the steps after his step, then how can he really accurately predict any of the steps after his step?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there were so many things, like even his part, the lipid nanoparticles, that had to be improved as well over time by other scientists. And there were so many other components that had to be improved in order for it to actually work. So, I mean, no, he's not the creator of mRNA vaccines, and he's been spreading a ton of misinformation. I mean, I kind of stay on top of the guy on Twitter as much as I can. He's just spreading all kinds of misinformation. He's kind of, in my mind, he's like the new Andrew Wakefield. Yeah, he's just like a once legitimate scientist who has gone full anti-vaccine. Like he's just spreading all kinds of garbage, like taking seriously the graphene oxide idea in COVID vaccines. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. His concerns about how the mRNA vaccines might affect fertility, if you want to consider them nullified by everything I just said, then there you go. But the concerns are just baseless, essentially. I mean, I know this kind of addresses one of the other questions you had here, but as far as we know, all of the data that we have on COVID vaccines and fertility says that they're safe. They're not going to affect fertility in any negative way. That is significant. I mean, one of your questions was about vaccinating pregnant women in their third trimester.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
Well.
Yeah.
I mean, so for what it's worth, my wife was she became fully vaccinated during her third trimester. When she was about 7 months pregnant is when she reached, fully vaccinated status. And we have a 4-month-old healthy baby now. She had no issues with her pregnancy. She had no issues with the birth. So
Right.
there's a personal story for you, but also we have data. You know, there were several people who became pregnant during the clinical trials for these vaccines. They weren't initially pregnant when they were enrolled, but they became pregnant. And the data around surrounding them that has been analyzed has clearly shown that, rates of miscarriage were the same or similar throughout placebo and vaccine groups during all of those clinical trials. And there were no outstanding complications in pregnancy that were detected. So we have no real reason to believe that there's any reason to be concerned about fertility with these vaccines. The data could be better, but as far as what we know now, there's no reason to
Right.
worry.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's still a novel virus. If it's a novel virus, then you know that the vaccines, definitely novel,
Mhm.
I guess, and really just it takes time it takes time for any issues to arise if they're going to arise. And if they don't arise, then the time without issues should kind of tell you there are no issues.
Right.
But either way, it takes time.
Yeah. And so far we've had a lot of time, and I think it's 3.5 billion at least doses of the vaccine given worldwide. So,
Wow.
I mean,
It's like
if
half the population of the world. That's massive.
well, so that's doses. It's not fully
Oh yeah,
vaccinated
okay.
people,
Okay.
but I mean that's a lot of doses, and if there's nothing concrete by now, it's really hard to say whether or not there will be anything new emerging in the future.
Right. Yeah. That was my thinking when the vaccine was first released out of trial and permitted to the first stage of people who were able to get it, like your healthcare workers and stuff. I wasn't too upset that I wasn't in that first group, but by the time my group came around, I was more than comfortable with the data, the numbers that everything was showing. There's
Hmm.
40,000 people from a trial is different than 4 million, you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Like you're just not going to get the same um, statistical power in 40,000 people in a trial that you're going to get once the vaccine's rolled out and millions of people have gotten it.
right, exactly.
Um,
Um, so, um,
this
oh,
person,
here's,
yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
just I wasn't looking at the chat. Sorry. So many people. Which one?
Yeah, this person's talking about new studies showing that
Oh, okay.
women who receive the vaccine have significant supply of antibodies in breast milk. Yeah, I mean,
That's
uh,
great. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my wife breastfeeds, and that makes me feel better that she's fully vaccinated and she's passing antibodies on to our baby. And, even though it's really rare for babies to suffer severe disease from COVID, I don't want to be one of those rare
Yeah.
cases. I would, ugh, I would, ugh,
Yeah.
that'd be
Who wants to
awful.
take that risk? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's,
Why take the risk? Why take the risk?
um, okay. So, why do you think the booster shot?
Booster shot. So, okay. So the science around booster shots right now says that most people don't need a booster shot. That's what the science says currently. Um, so a lot of people right now are talking about boosters because situations like Israel, for example, which is a highly vaccinated country, they're
Mhm.
seeing a lot of COVID cases, right? But if you look at the data on severe
Right.
illness is mostly in unvaccinated people in Israel and
Yeah.
similar countries.
Largely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's happening here is what happens with all vaccines, where you get vaccinated, your body has an immune response. Part of that immune response is creating a lot of antibodies that are going to circulate throughout your bloodstream. Over time, the amount of antibodies that are circulating throughout your bloodstream are going to wane. They're going to decrease. But that doesn't mean you're not left with immune memory, right? So immune memory is what we're aiming for with vaccines. We want your body to remember what you see in the vaccine so that when it encounters the real thing, you're going to be able to fight it a lot better than you would have otherwise, right? So when the antibodies are waning, then you become more vulnerable to initial infection, but you're still protected against severe disease. And that's what vaccines are meant to do, prevent severe disease. So the analogy that I've heard other virologists use that I really like is it's like if you have a fire extinguisher in your house, right? You're not going to prevent a fire from happening, but if a fire happens, you're going to be able to put it out a lot faster. You're going to be a lot safer, right? That's kind of what the vaccine is. The vaccine is the fire extinguisher in your house, because if you don't have that fire extinguisher in your house, the fire is going to be more likely to spread a lot easier throughout your house and cause a lot more damage. You don't want that. You want to be able to put it out fast. And that's what the immune memory does for your body that the vaccine grants you, which is why most people who are vaccinated don't get severe disease when they actually get infected.
Right. I've made that argument to people in the past that because I think a lot of people are under the misconception that vaccines promote good health or whatever, and it doesn't. Like, vaccines don't have any impact on your current health. Like, you could take myself, who's vaccinated, and takes it, like, compare me up against someone who's not vaccinated. We may be in the same health today, but say next week we're both exposed to someone, say, with measles. Well, I'm betting a week after that I'm going to be in much better health than that person. I mean, even if it doesn't prevent the illness overall, it prevents the severity of the illness.
Right.
So it just, it gets you in a much better place in which to combat it. So
yeah. And if we carry that out, like if most people are who are cases but are also vaccinated are not having severe disease, then that's the point. Then suddenly, if almost everybody who gets infected doesn't develop severe disease, then we're not in a pandemic anymore. We're in a situation where we're managing a disease that we can, control. So it's like, I remember back in the beginning of the pandemic, and still now, I guess, when some conspiracy theorists would talk about COVID only kills, this percent of people. Why are we freaking out? Well, I mean, with a vaccine, that percentage, which they usually got wrong, is pushed even lower, to the point where they'd be right, where we don't have to freak out about it, because severe disease is so uncommon that, those people aren't crashing healthcare systems. They're not flooding emergency departments, and we're able to handle it. We're able to control it. So,
I mean, like, one thing I hear a lot, and it will also kind of correlate or just spill over into a question, is people are like, well, why get the vaccine? Why take that risk? Why, if, I can handle it. It's only killing this many people. I'm in great health. I don't have any comorbidities or whatever. So, I mean, really, if you can, and one thing that I hear a lot of is, if you can still get COVID after being vaccinated, why get the vaccine?
Yeah.
I know. I'm asking just to get a professional answer.
I know. So to that, I just always, the analogy that I put out on Twitter, at least, is it's like asking if I can still get in a car crash while driving sober, then why can't I drive drunk?
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right.
like, yes, you can still get COVID while fully vaccinated, but you're going to be much less likely to, one, suffer severe disease from it, and two, you're also going to be less likely to pass it on. And that's what I think is missed a lot. And also, I mean, a lot of conspiracy circles still think that vaccines don't prevent transmission. But the story with that was, at first, when COVID vaccines were rolled out, we didn't know whether or not they prevented transmission because it wasn't directly tested. So scientists aren't going to say something. They're not going to speak to something that they haven't directly tested.
Right, exactly.
So because in the clinical trials, it's 40,000 people. They can only test so many things within that population. So transmission was not one of the things that they could test. But now we have studies that have, surveyed hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of contacts.
Yeah, the contact tracing that people speak about. Yeah.
Yeah, and multiple studies consistently show that vaccines reduce transmission. And if you want to apply a number to it, a really large study in the Netherlands that, at the time, the alpha variant was the most common circulating strain. But, given those stipulations, the number associated with that was 71% reduction in transmission. And that's huge. That is over 2/3 reduction in transmission. If we could cut the amount of cases that we have of COVID by 2/3, that's really important. So vaccines, get them. They're really effective.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm looking at the chat here for questions. And if I miss anyone's questions, I'm not trying to be rude or whatever. I'm just trying to, I don't know. He's not, Dr. Daniel, though, brilliant and awesome in his field. He's not a doctor. So asking questions like, should you get the vaccine? I don't think that that's something he's going to answer. So I'm skipping over questions like that. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm a PhD. I'm not a medical doctor. So.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's what I meant. I hear doctor, like for a PhD, I think doctorate, not right. Doctor, but and Amber's here. Amber, I'm going to add you to the stream now. So I don't know if you're ready because okay, there you go. All right. If you can hear us, we're here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi.
Yay. Hi guys. Okay. So I'm still like finishing up prepping dinner and stuff, but I'm here and I can hear and I can, talk, and I'll turn on my camera as soon as I'm done and I can sit down and
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's some of the questions I thought you and I might be able to weigh in. I haven't asked yet, so don't worry.
Okie dokie.
But yeah, a lot of these, they're not ones we can answer. Here's another one.
Yeah.
Is the COVID vaccine made using stem cells?
No.
So
it wasn't for you.
My simple answer, no. Next.
So the short answer is no, but it sort of, to get into this question, it depends which vaccine you're talking about. So the mRNA vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer, they don't use cells at all. They're able to synthesize the mRNA strand, the particular sequence, completely independent of any cells. And then packaging them into the lipid nanoparticles, that also doesn't require any cells. So most people are getting the mRNA vaccines right now. So no, those aren't made with any stem cells.
And it's not an ingredient in the vector vaccines either,
no.
Right? Yes.
It's not an ingredient in the vector vaccines. You're right. Yeah. So when it comes to the vector vaccines, the vector that they're using to deliver the vaccine to you is it's a modified harmless virus, right?
Can you
So
pronounce it for me?
Okay.
Because I say adenovirus, but apparently that's wrong.
I say adenovirus, but
Okay.
I mean, there are plenty of words in biology that people say all which ways. Like
Okay.
some people say apoptosis, some people say apoptosis. It doesn't matter. But yeah, the Johnson and Johnson and the AstraZeneca vaccines, for example, those are vector vaccines. And yeah, the harmless virus is an adenovirus. And in order to grow that adenovirus that contains what essentially is the vaccine that is delivered to you, you have to grow that virus in cells because all viruses need a host in order to grow.
Right.
And the cells that are used in the production of those vaccines are human embryonic kidney cells. And so those are technically stem cells, but the vaccine itself is purified away from the cells once they're used to grow the virus. So, and they're even tested for like residual DNA because they don't want cellular material to be in the vaccine. So it's not an ingredient. It's just used to grow the virus, which is a necessary step in creating a vaccine that is a vector vaccine.
Okay. There's one question here. I don't want to miss it. So I want to, where is it? Oh, here we go. Lily Wallace asks, is ivermectin proved to be even more of a wonder drug in human health, improving the nutrition, general health, and well-being of billions of people?
What?
Yeah. So what's the story with ivermectin? Because Joe Rogan is really,
He's out of his mind. Didn't you just did?
yeah, I know. But he to a lot of people he's giving it credibility. So
I know.
I remember back in the 1999 when people were taking horse drugs, the government, restricted their, I'm talking about ketamine in case
Oh yeah. Yep.
But now we're just, handing out
people didn't stop taking that though,
Yeah, I mean, no, but as the government did make it a Schedule 3 or something.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So the story with ivermectin, it started out getting its honors, getting its prizes, getting its recognition as a human drug for treating parasitic infections. Right. It was very effective in treating things like river blindness, which was a big deal. I mean, that's something that affected a lot of people, and ivermectin kills the parasite that causes river blindness. That's just an example. So it can be a human drug that can be used very effectively for certain things. It is also a horse dewormer that is used to treat parasitic infections in animals. And just because it's shown to be effective in treating parasitic infections in humans, that doesn't mean that it's going to be effective in treating viral infections in humans.
Right.
And sure enough, I mean, scientists have tested this. Scientists are very curious people. We all want to find the next big thing that's going to, make a name for ourselves or whatever. So if ivermectin was that thing, then scientists would be dying to publish it. But
yes, someone would have. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But to many scientists' dismay, the people who tested it found that it's not effective in treating COVID. There's a really great Cochrane review. For those of you who are familiar with Cochrane reviews, there's one out on ivermectin, and they conclude that it's not effective in treating COVID. There are several well-designed, peer-reviewed publications of randomized controlled trials that show that ivermectin is not effective in treating COVID. So it's just not a good treatment for COVID. And this craze of ivermectin treating COVID, it's the new hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
It's something that conspiracy theorists latch onto because it is a cheap drug that is already, pre-existing, already used widely. They want that to be the thing that cures COVID. When
like it's the new vitamin C.
Yeah. Absolutely. The thing that kills me about it is that they go on and on and on about FDA approval and these vaccines are experimental. You can't see my air quotes. And yet they're willing to literally, and I don't mean the human version of ivermectin. I mean, they're going to animal supply stores and getting the kind for horses.
Yes.
And livestock, exactly.
And I'm thinking, okay, you understand that FDA approval isn't just like carte blanche, right? Like you can't just, it doesn't just mean that, okay, this is approved for depression, so you can take it for, I don't know, premature ejaculation. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of anything else.
So,
but it just,
go on. I'm sorry.
No, just it doesn't work that way. So they I guess, any other time they think that the FDA is full of crap, but when the FDA has given authorization or approved a malaria drug, then they think it just can be used for any and everything, but only selectively.
I mean, I'm curious why those same people aren't touting penicillin as a COVID cure, because that's a very effective antibiotic that is approved and widely used, but it's an antibiotic. It's not an antiviral.
And there's more adverse events with penicillin than there are with vaccines.
People are,
someone here in chat just brought up, I don't get why people act like ivermectin is veterinary. It is commonly used med for all kinds of viruses, but it's not though, right?
No.
You just said it's not a viral medication.
It is used for humans too, for like malaria. Like he already explained it all. But what we're talking about specifically was people going to feed stores and getting horse ivermectin.
Yeah, I think this person might be. So some people refer to ivermectin as a treatment for viruses, and then they cite studies that show that it was effective in vitro against viruses.
Everything's in vitro. Bleach work in vitro.
So many drugs can reduce a viral replication rate, can kill a virus in a tube, which is what in vitro means, like in a dish.
Right. No one's environment is that of when in vitro.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you so
environment.
I know that a lot of people can relate to this. If you think about like all the promising cancer treatments that you might hear about in the news, a lot of times those are, newspapers reporting on some paper, some experiment that happened that was done in vitro. So scientists found that some compound, some medication can kill cancer cells in vitro. And then you never hear about it again because they do the later trials, the animal trials, the clinical trials, and they find out that it's not as effective in a body than it is in a dish. And it's an unfortunate reality of, science reporting in mass media that kind of thing happens. But it's the same kind of thing. Ivermectin might be able to kill viruses in vitro, but clinical studies exist that show us pretty convincingly it doesn't work against COVID in a body.
Right. So here's something I think the both of you can weigh in on. Like, pretty much, what are some good because one of the things I hear a lot of is people don't know who to trust. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, and usually one side is louder than the other, so it's hard to know who to listen to. So what are some good sources for people to turn to when they have questions?
Well, I think that Daniel or Dr. Wilson, it's so weird. I have a thing like if I'm introduced to you as Dr. So-and-so, then you will always be Dr. So-and-so. But when I, met you again, can't see my air quotes, you were, just Daniel Wilson. And so
Right.
now, but so yes, Dr. Wilson's, I think his YouTube videos are
Yeah,
great
Amber's been fangirling a little bit here since I invited her on.
They pack a lot of information in them, and they're explained in a way that I think most people can understand. So
that's the first thing I noticed too. Like it just the way, I mean, when you use the comment or the phrase, can you put it in layman's term? When it comes to me, you can't get any more layman than me. So if I can understand what you're saying, then you're doing a great job.
Right.
So
it works double purpose. Like they say, if you can't explain it, you don't really know it. So we're making sure that Dr. Wilson knows it and he's explaining it to us too. So we're doing double duty here.
So I mean, well, besides Dr. Wilson's channel, then, like if people have questions and they sit down at the computer and they open up their search browser, where can they go to get information that they can trust?
My three go to. So it's like if I'm in a hurry, I don't have a lot of time, I go to Vaxopedia. If I've got a little bit of time, but not a whole ton of time, I go to Skeptical Raptor. And if I have a little more time to devote, then I go to Science-Based Medicine and so.
I second all three of those things. Okay. Vaxopedia, Skeptical Raptor, Science-Based Medicine. Those are all great sources. Personally, what I use to help keep up, so because I'm not in the field of virology or epidemiology, I don't like do the research every single day to keep up with it. So to help me keep up with it, I like to tune in while I'm working. I like to tune into a podcast called This Week in Virology.
Oh, okay.
It's a podcast that's run by virologists. The main host is Vincent Racaniello. I'll type his name.
Vincent. Oh, yeah, I know who that is. He's great on Twitter.
Yeah, he's awesome. But that podcast, it's hardcore academic virologists, and they just talk about virology. And it's going to be a lot of their episodes are long. They're kind of in the weeds. They have academic humor, so I can't say they're the most exciting podcast to listen to. I really enjoy listening to them, but if you want consistent, good information, I would recommend listening to them. If you have if you're working throughout the day and you can listen to a podcast, and you have an hour or two to kill, listen to them. They also have within their podcast kind of a sideshow called Clinical Updates with Dr. Daniel Griffin. And in those episodes, those usually run about 40 minutes to an hour. And in those episodes, it's a medical doctor who goes through all the latest data about COVID. And those are really helpful. So I would recommend that in addition to the other websites.
What was the name of that one again? I'm sorry.
This week in virology.
Yeah. Okay. I'm putting a link in the chat right now.
Oh, Amber. Okay. Jess should be taking it down. Jess, you're writing this down.
Oh yeah, and I will add all of these sources. All the links I'm providing here in the chat, I will add to the description once the stream is done. So, and I will also add chapters to this, to the description, so people can find their questions easily enough.
Thank you, Kim.
So, okay, so let's see, where are we in the questions there? Okay, here's one that I got a lot of too, and I realize you're again, you're not a medical doctor, I get that, but maybe you can provide some insight anyways. Why is it that some people, say for some cancer patients, for example, cannot get the vaccine? What is there anything special in this? Right. I know it's immunocompromised. I get that. But why is this vaccine, like the mRNA vaccine, an issue for some immunocompromised people?
It's not an issue of safety, right? It's because their immune system may not be able to mount a response. Like they may not be able to have an immune response if their immune system is already, busy elsewhere. I believe.
That is correct. As far as I know, there are no safety issues for people who are immunocompromised to get the mRNA vaccines, because the mRNA vaccines, it's all composed of biological material that's going to be metabolized very naturally by your body, and otherwise, you just hope that it elicits an immune response. But if you're immunocompromised, you're not going to elicit as good of an immune response as someone who is not immunocompromised. So the issue that mRNA vaccines have with immunocompromised people is just the fact that they might not have as much protection.
Okay.
So
and they really do weigh the risk benefit to these things. Vaccines are the safest things coming from pharma. Like they have to be, because they start out at a place where there is no, you're giving it to healthy people. There is no, on being sick or unwell, so they have to be, they start at a disadvantage. So they have to be that much safer. So when someone isn't, when there's a chance they're not going to mount an immune response and they're not going to have the protection, then that's weighed into the risk benefit ratio. And sometimes it's just not worth it. And that's
I never thought of it like that before. I know, because if you're sick and you take a medication, then the medication's job is to turn a negative into a positive.
Right.
Where if you're not ill and you're taking a vaccine, well, the vaccine's job is to take a positive and keep it positive
and make it more positive. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
That's why when people try to claim that vaccines are, I'm like, seriously, they started at disadvantage. You have no idea how safe they literally have to be in order to get anywhere near you. Like, risk benefit isn't a joke. Like, they really take these things seriously. I have been to ACIP, like I know, or ACIP. It's they're very serious about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really there's a lot that's required to get a vaccine to market. And, I tried to choose my words carefully, because first I thought FDA approved, but getting it to market, that can also be an emergency use of authorization, which is what we had with COVID vaccines. And so, there's a lot that's required to just get it out into a market, whether that's regular approval, whether it's EUA, whichever. There's a lot that's required, and it's really hard. If there are any serious safety concerns that are detected by during clinical trials, then you're done. You're not going to get approved.
Right, and that's been my argument too about this, because a lot of people have thrown up concern and everything because this was a rushed vaccine, or they're hurried up and put on the market. They're skipping over steps in the trial, and I try to explain to people that's not how it works. The only thing that was maybe rushed or skipped, or not even really skipped over, but rushed, would be like the bureaucracy of it. But the actual steps in the trials, those have to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
some of them were allowed to
correct?
overlap, where they aren't usually allowed to do that. The overlapping of animal, the preclinical trials, and I think like stage 1 in Moderna or maybe Pfizer, I don't know which one. But they still happened, and at a length of time, necessary to determine what they needed to determine, because each phase, I don't remember, phase 1 determines, efficacy and maybe a little bit of safety. I don't remember how it's all, but they're all, broken down in the length of time that is required, not the length of time that you maybe think should be required, but at the length of time that's required to get the information or the data that's needed. So,
exactly. There were no steps. There were no corners cut.
What I like to is 100,000, over 100, I think there's almost 113,000 people who were enrolled in phase 3 clinical trials for the 3 in the United States. So
Yes.
Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. Normally that number per trial is about 3,000. Am I correct? You usually get 3,000-ish participants in stage or phase 3 clinical trials.
As far as I'm aware, you're supposed to have several thousand in phase 3 clinical trials. I don't know what the average is for like normal phase 3 clinical trials actually, but the really powerful thing with these, what's that?
100,000 is a lot more than is usually required.
Yeah.
So we tested on we definitely have an idea of what it looks like in a healthy, middle-aged population, before anything else.
And to add to that, the great thing was that all of these clinical trials were going on around the same time, completely independent of each other by different companies, using different groups of people. And the results were very consistent across clinical trials.
And across the countries.
Yeah, exactly. Because individual countries are going to have their own standards. And
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because I was talking. So go ahead.
Oh, no.
I was talking over you. I tend to do that. But will you say that again? I didn't hear you.
Oh, every country is going to have their different standards, their different politics. But the science remained very consistent among different countries that tested these vaccines. So
absolutely.
That's also very reassuring.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I have a question for you, actually, Dr. Wilson. You're molecular biology, so I'm sure you know about what is it, molecular mimicry?
Yes.
And so, like how they're talking about, and I'm not even going to try to say it because this is another one of those words that I just mess up real bad. But GB, please know what I'm talking about. This
Guillain-Barre.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
Guillain-Barre. Whatever. Like we said earlier, the pronunciation is whatever.
So what is there? I recently read, and I haven't seen a whole lot on it, but that there is some potential for that, and the mRNA vaccines, I think, because of the molecular mimicry and the how.
So I'm not aware of any data that specifically looks at Guillain-Barre syndrome in relation to COVID vaccines. But there's a story with that in regards to flu vaccines.
Yeah, I heard about it with the flu, and I tried to find the I'm pretty sure, I'm not even sure what it was that I saw this on, but I was just like, what? But I figured I would hold on to it and ask you about it, but no, I can't find the name, but I'll try and look for it again. But it is I'm sorry, I'm looking for it now. Like
That's fine.
I'm scrolling my phone, like trying to find
yeah, it's I mean the short story in regards to flu vaccine is that you're more likely to get Guillain-Barre syndrome
from
by getting infected with the flu,
right,
than you are with getting the flu vaccine. So,
but is it? Yeah, it wasn't that like a lot of the I think it was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that it was causing blood clots or whatever.
Yeah,
and like the thing is though is that the people who were getting the blood clots were mostly female, were mostly of a certain age group, and like there was so much data that was not factored in, so many variables that were not even discussed, let alone addressed, like whether or not how many of them were on birth control medications, because those are known to cause blood clots, and information like that. So I mean, it's like correlation does not equal causation. In other words, just because you see something happening in a certain group of people who also happen to have been vaccinated does not mean that they are one and they're interconnected at all. And that's another thing too. Like, and one of the other questions someone had asked is, what are the possible causes of kids 12 and up having reactions to the vaccine, such as heart rhythms or heart problems? I'm not sure what they mean by heart rhythms or heart
Okay.
problems, but
The
apparently
myocarditis.
there have been some
Yeah.
cardiovascular issues among kids 12 and up, I guess.
Well,
Or the
Yeah,
concerns. Anyways, I don't know about issues, but
No,
I mean,
yeah, they're referring to myocarditis or
okay.
pericarditis.
Are those two different things?
Yeah, technically.
Okay. Because I
don't
saw
know.
myocarditis, but then all of a sudden people were saying the other one, the pericarditis, and I'm not familiar with that. So
Well,
I'm
what's
not up on the difference between the two, but they're basically both inflammation of the heart. Heart
okay.
issues.
Okay. Close enough.
Yeah. there are nuances there, but essentially the thing with heart issues and COVID vaccines, right? So myocarditis and pericarditis, those are things that happen normally within a population. They're normally caused by viral infections, like just infection with the common cold or any viral infection that might go undiagnosed can cause a myocarditis or pericarditis situation. It's often resolved on its own in the general population.
Right.
So it all has to do with the immune response.
Cut it out, Jay.
To the virus.
Jesus.
It's basically a side effect of the immune response to the virus. So when you're vaccinated, you're going to have an immune response, right? So it's theoretically conceivable that a side effect of that could be a myocarditis situation. And so far, the data show that it might be causally linked to the vaccine in some situations, in some rare situations. However, most of those cases are mild and resolve on their own.
Yeah, okay. That was my next question. Yeah.
And COVID infection is going to have a much greater risk of myocarditis, pericarditis happening than vaccination. So kind of the rule of thumb is whatever side effect you're worried about with vaccination, you're more likely to get that side effect if you encounter the real thing, if you encounter the actual virus, pathogen, whatever you're getting vaccinated against. So
right. Okay.
So it really comes down to a risk benefit analysis. And if you're worried about myocarditis being caused by the spike protein circulating through your body, then get vaccinated, because you definitely don't want SARS-CoV-2 to infect you, be replicating actively in your tissues, producing spike protein actively, and lead to a situation where you could likely develop one of those side effects you're worried about, or worse.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that explanation can even be applied to a lot of other things besides just, this issue.
Right.
So Heather asks, she had asked this earlier too, but I kind of skipped over it, but I think maybe we can try and answer it. She asks, I just asked what Dr. Wilson felt about the Delta variant and how bad it is spreading. What's the big, and this, I've wondered this too, because in my household, that's all I hear about is the Delta variant. And, I'm just like, whatever. So yeah, what's the big deal with this?
So honestly, if you're listening to mainstream media, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist for a hot second and say that if you're listening to the mainstream media about Delta variant, you're probably getting unnecessarily scared. So what we can tell so far scientifically about the Delta variant is it does seem to spread more efficiently than other variants. However, vaccines still protect against it really, really well.
Mhm.
I mean, it's above 80% efficacy in protecting against severe disease from the Delta variant with vaccination. That's still huge. That is,
Yeah.
if I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were first talking about vaccines against this thing, if you had said that the vaccines were going to be over 80% effective, that would have blown scientists away. We would have been like, that's amazing. That's a really great vaccine.
Yeah.
So it's down from above 90% for like the alpha variant and the original variants that the vaccines were designed against, but it's still really, really good.
It's still
So
80% more than we had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the way you just said that too, because like I had someone just yesterday or day before say something about how the Dr. Fauci, they hate Dr. Fauci. I don't know why.
Yeah, I know.
But Dr. Fauci had lied when he told us that the vaccines were working well against the Delta variant. And I'm like, they still work exceptionally well for a variant that didn't even exist when they were created. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, is 64, which is higher, 0? That's just preventing infection. 64% is what I had read.
Right.
At completely preventing infection from Delta, which did not even exist when COVID vaccines were created.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I explained earlier in the stream, where it's something that sounds counterintuitive to most people, but vaccines are not meant to prevent infection in the same way that a fire extinguisher is not meant to prevent a fire from starting. The vaccine is to help you avoid severe disease. It's supposed to extinguish the viral infection as quickly as possible before damage or transmission happens. The same way a fire extinguisher is meant to put out a fire as quickly as possible.
Love that. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah,
that.
that's a
That is
really
the
good.
I mean,
best
I have to
analogy
credit
I've ever heard.
the folks over at This Week in Virology for that analogy because that's where I got it.
That is the best. I'm like my if you could see
Yeah.
me, my jaw is I'm just staring like, oh my gosh, that is amazing the way you just put that. Okay. So good on them. Good on you for remembering it, because that's amazing. I'm gonna steal it now.
Yeah, that I
Okay,
mean that's
so
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, go on.
No, go on to we can go on to the next question.
Okay. Well, I know this is a question that a lot of people wonder, especially those who spend any time advocating for vaccines or any medical treatment, really. Like, why do you think it is that so many people are reluctant to trust the science and the data and those in charge of it all today?
I
Just a
think
real simple question for you, real simple.
yeah, no, it's complicated. I think there are lots of things.
Yeah.
So I can only like think back to viral outbreaks in history that spawned a lot of misinformation in order to kind of understand what's happening now. Because,
right.
for example, when HIV was a huge thing in the 80s, that's something that touched on so many different aspects of life that were easy to politicize. Like it touched on sexuality, it touched on race, it touched on drug use. I mean, and there was so much misinformation. There still is a lot of misinformation about HIV because it touched on all those things. And now COVID comes along and we have lockdowns, which genuinely affect people's livelihood. We have, this age gap where COVID does tend to be more likely to affect older people than it does younger people. But I think it's easy to see that COVID has bled into so many different aspects of normal life. So there are a lot of emotions running high with it and a lot of discomfort. It's not comfortable to think that there's a virus out there that could one day infect you or someone you love or, seriously affect them. So
the reality of it, just
yeah. So it's, and of course the government is involved with trying to enforce policies that help us avoid the worst of it.
That in theory.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not from South Carolina.
In theory, yeah. The government tries, but they're not always great at it. So there are a lot of things that go into this, and it's easy to accept the simple, these like conspiracy theories that just give this illusion of putting all of the puzzle pieces together and accepting that because it's an easy solution, easy explanation. Oh, we just take horse dewormer. Yeah, I know ivermectin can be a human drug, but the meme is just too good. Yeah, just take horse dewormer. It's that easy, just take hydroxychloroquine. It's that easy. Just be healthy. It's that easy. It's never that easy. It's never that easy. But people love to accept those explanations, and it's understandable. So I feel like it's hard for people to trust the nuanced science, partially because scientists suck at explaining things generally. But
I think they've gotten a lot better. Like I think there's a lot more science communicators out there, and I think in general, like Dr. Peter Hotez, like he's all over the place. He's always informing, and he's just very, I call him the badass bow-tied scientist, because he's just he's everywhere. Like, the man must never sleep. He writes books, and he's on this news channel, and he's always on Twitter, and it's like, oh my gosh, man. Like, but like people like him, and then Dr. Gorski, and a lot more people have gotten involved even before COVID. We were seeing a lot more doctors and scientists get involved online, talking about vaccines and antivaxxers and stuff like that. And so I think it's improving for sure about scientists and communication and stuff like that. So, but I think that just in academia in general, they're usually not the best communicators.
Yeah, I mean, we're not. When we get our PhDs, we're not trained to communicate science to the general public.
Right.
We're trained to do science, and maybe we're trained to communicate science to our colleagues.
Right.
Yeah, I argue that with my son all the time. He works in IT, so I mean, he's very well educated by now in all things internet and whatnot and whatever. But to ask him a question and for him to try and explain it to you, you will walk away more confused than ever, because he does not know how to explain anything to the layman's, I guess.
That's the flip
he's brilliant,
side.
But he's just horrible at telling people how he's brilliant.
That's the flip side of Dunning-Kruger. Like,
they
don't know that what they know is not what they assume that everyone knows what they know. And so they're, starting at a level that is way beyond you, So,
so I want to address two things here in comments. First, Stefan had asked something, and I already answered him a little bit. I told him how we address this for the most part in the beginning of the stream. And what he had asked was, I just wanted to ask Dr. Wilson what he thinks of the newest research paper, which isn't yet peer-reviewed, circulating, which compares naturally versus acquired immunity from the Pfizer vaccine in Israel. And I think that would touch on very much about what we discussed in the beginning about is natural immunity winning,
Missed that part.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like he points, like Stefan points out, this isn't peer reviewed or whatever, but I mean, are there like studies or research that you know of going on or having been conducted that is comparing this? I mean,
Yeah.
no.
So like kind of like I said in the beginning of the stream,
Right.
it makes perfect sense that a natural infection is going to give you a more measurably robust immune response than a vaccine, because
Right.
it's a large dose of live vaccine that you're getting when you get infected. But that's not worth the risk.
Right.
It's, you know, you're getting vaccinated and you're getting protection that is still really, really good without the risk of long COVID, without as high a risk of severe disease, without as high a risk of transmitting it to someone who might die from it. I mean, the benefits are all there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
also, another thing to point out is, if you've been naturally infected, that still doesn't mean that you shouldn't get a vaccine. It doesn't mean that you have better immunity than the vaccinated and you don't need to get vaccinated. That's not what that means, because we have done studies to directly test how immunity stacks up when you've only been naturally infected versus when you've been naturally infected plus vaccinated. And all the time, in every single case, natural infection plus vaccination is better than natural infection alone. So if you want to get the best protection for yourself and for your community, you should still get vaccinated, even if you've been infected before.
Right.
Here's my
put
honey.
Yeah, I put Jay Summers' comment here up on the screen.
Hey, Jay.
He's a vaccine advocate colleague of ours. But like he put it, I think, pretty well too. Here's the thing. Would you want natural immunity from smallpox or rabies or tetanus? No.
Yeah,
So,
no.
that's the thing. Like, I mean, natural immunity from chickenpox, the risk, though there's still a risk, the risk is still much lower than the risk of obtaining natural immunity from COVID, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not just about which immunity is better, it's about which immunity comes at a lower cost.
Right.
Yes. And the margin of benefit that you gain from like natural immunity versus vaccine, like the studies right now show that the immune response is more robust in natural infection, but how much of a clinical benefit does that translate to? That hasn't really been studied. You know, it's been studied where natural infection, you might be less likely to become infected in the future, like become a case, which is when like actually like you have some reason to get tested and you test positive. You might be less likely to become a case if you have natural infection versus vaccination. But what's the margin of benefit there? It's probably really small. And that small margin of benefit is definitely not worth the risk when it comes to severe illness, transmission, all that stuff.
Advocating for vaccines, we would run into this a lot when it came to measles, and parents say pushing for their kids to get measles because then they'll have natural immunity for life. Well, I mean, the vaccine for measles, okay, it's now recommended that people born 1981 and later get, or earlier, I'm sorry, born before 1981, get a third or speak to their doctor about getting a booster for measles. That I ended up having to do that because of this. So for granted, without natural immunity, you might have to get a booster if you didn't get the 2 shots that are already, assigned or whatever. So there's that. Or you can run the risk of some serious complications from giving your child measles. I mean, I don't understand how this is really a debate.
Yeah. And also measles is a good example here because it wasn't until kind of recently that we found out that getting infected with measles naturally is actually way worse than we thought.
Really?
Sorry.
Yeah, I had made a couple videos on my channel about this. They're a little older. My hair wasn't as big at the time, but
I love the hair,
and I definitely wasn't as comfortable on camera as I am now back then. But the information is there. Essentially, what was found was that countries that started vaccinating a lot against measles, they saw a reduction, like no matter when they did it, like what year they did it, they saw a reduction in overall mortality that was greater than what they would have expected if they had just eliminated measles. So they thought, the measles vaccine seems to be doing something extra that we weren't expecting. And so it was investigated more, and it was found that if you're infected by measles naturally, paradoxically, even though you get this robust long-term immunity against measles, your immunity to other things essentially undergoes this immune amnesia.
Yeah.
That is what it's called.
Yeah.
That's right. I forgot about
It was
that.
coming back
Okay.
to me as you were saying it. I was like, oh yeah, immune
Yeah.
amnesia. I remember.
All right.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about this. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So they figured it out on a cellular level, how measles vaccine affects your immune system to basically make you more vulnerable to other infectious diseases for the next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And that vulnerability increases your chance of dying from other infections. So that's the reduction in mortality that they saw, because people were getting the measles vaccine, they weren't getting, sick with measles, and their immune systems weren't getting damaged in the short term by the virus. So those people were more people were living past childhood than expected, which is a really great thing. And so if we apply that to COVID, it's like we don't really know what all of the long-term effects from a natural severe infection might be. We have long COVID that we know about, but we don't really fully understand. So who knows really what in 5 years, what we'll understand about what severe COVID infection does to you long term.
Yeah.
And if you can protect yourself against that, why wouldn't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me, and I'm not quite sure why, but it reminds me. I literally had someone ask just like, this past week. They said, does anybody else find it odd that people with COVID are also getting pneumonia? Doesn't it seem odd that, all of a sudden pneumonia is, what? Like,
yeah.
I was just like,
I mean,
who ties your shoes, man? Because like, I forget exactly how they phrased it, but it was so ridiculous. The question, I have to look it up now. You guys go ahead.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, it's been well known for a very long time that respiratory viruses lead to pneumonia, because when the virus infects your lungs, it causes damage. It wreaks havoc, and in the wake of all that damage, bacteria can take over, and then you get pneumonia.
Because it's an opportunistic infection.
Right. But if you didn't have the viral infection in the first place, you wouldn't have had the pneumonia. So,
I just found it. They said, I just find it odd that all of a sudden everyone is being diagnosed with COVID pneumonia, myself included, over the last 2 weeks. I personally know at least 10 with the diagnosis. I had pneumonia 2.5 years ago. I didn't feel any different with COVID pneumonia than I felt with just pneumonia. Anyone else experiencing this? And I was just like, because it's the same pneumonia. It's the same. It's just classified by what caused it. It's still the same pneumonia. Like, it's just an infection of one or both lungs. Like, I don't understand this. Why?
Right.
4T Love asked, and I just want to say, this your question was addressed like often throughout the stream. But it's a question though that I think is important, that it's something I don't think that can be addressed too much. So if you want to give it 30 seconds to go over it again, but they ask, why take the vax if it doesn't prevent COVID?
Oh.
Well, if you can still get in a car crash and die from the car crash while you're wearing a seatbelt, then why would you wear a seatbelt? I mean, if that sounds like weird or stupid, then it's the same logic, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
Nothing,
I think
protections are not 100%. So
Nothing in the world is nothing
right.
at all.
But
except for that.
I think that like a lot of people with this question, they're comparing taking the vaccine to not taking the vaccines. They're comparing as if they're almost equal. Like, okay, let's say you take the vaccine, but you still get COVID. So I think a lot of them look at it as, why did I take that risk of the vaccine? Why did I take this risk of something horrible going wrong from the vaccine if I was just going to get COVID anyways? Let's say that, it's expected that every COVID infection after being vaccinated is going to have a recovery, Let's just say that. Let's just throw that out there. Like, what risk is there really to begin with the vaccine for that
Right.
to not be worth it?
yeah, I mean,
There-
so with COVID, a lot of people are saying now that everybody's going to get it eventually. I hope that not everybody gets it eventually, but
Right.
with how widespread it is now, and with the rate vaccines are going worldwide, it's safe to say that you are likely to get it within your lifetime.
It's like the new flu.
Yeah. So when you do get it, you probably want to have protection. You want to have that fire extinguisher to put out the infection as fast as possible when you do get it. And the only way that's going to happen is if you're vaccinated, because otherwise your body will have never seen SARS-CoV-2 before.
That's a very good point. Yeah. How can your body fight off something it's never seen before? The vaccine, if nothing else, it I guess you could say it breaks your immune system's cherry. I don't know.
yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's one way.
It gets it ready.
Okay, so here's a good question. Here's one I see a lot of too. Have you seen anyone, or have you heard of people or cases of anyone who's had it more than once or more than twice? Like, are there repeat infections from this?
Oh yeah, repeat infections happen for sure. They're not super common as far as I know, but they happen.
Right. And I imagine as time goes on, too, more and more will happen because, it's still a novel virus.
Yeah, and so what I worry about with that, and I guess what I worry about with the whole argument of natural immunity is better, is if you're going to go with the idea that natural immunity is better, then that kind of requires the virus spreading enough so that you eventually get natural immunity. And never mind all the damage that spread is going to cause. But secondary to that, all of that spread, all that transmission is going to involve more and more viral replication.
Right.
And with more and more replication, we have this thing called evolution. So at what point will the virus evolve into something where, people who have already been infected by it, it's essentially a new virus?
Right.
I mean, that would take a lot of evolution, but that's the kind of reality we're looking at if we don't want to vaccinate, if we don't want to wear masks, if we don't want to take precautions to drive its spread down to really low numbers. I mean, that's the reality we're looking at, because it's just going to keep spreading. It's going to keep going all over the world, and it's going to evolve. It's going to keep causing illness. It's going to keep turning into something that can keep spreading among people, because that's what it wants to do. It wants to keep spreading.
You had actually informed me of something about a year ago, which I still find incredibly interesting. I was in a debate or whatever discussion on Facebook on a local media thread, and like a lot at the time, a lot of people were concerned about, this is just going to mutate, it's going to change again, just like the flu. What's the point of the vaccine? It's not going to be effective in a year or whatever. And you kind of broke down the difference between I don't know what's the word for it, like the shift, something shift or whatever.
Oh, yeah, antigenic shift.
Antigenic shift or whatever. You explained the difference between, like, say, the flu virus and the COVID virus. Like, the COVID moves at a much slower rate, and when it does replicate, like the new copy is almost identical to the previous copy. That's how you would explain it. I mean, is that still the case? And like, maybe break it down for the people here. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that question. So, SARS-CoV-2 in relation to flu definitely does evolve much slower. So the reason flu can evolve so quickly and the reason we have a new strain each year is because it infects pigs, birds, and humans. And the new flu strain originates every year in Southeastern Asia, where lots of pig and poultry farming happens. And, the new flu strain of the year will jump from a pig or a bird to humans. And the humans will start to circulate it. And then that's the flu strain that circulates for that year. But it's the fact that it can jump species so easily that allows it to literally swap whole sections of its genome with other flu viruses that have co-infected that organism.
Not many contagious diseases, whatever, are, what is it, zoonotic or something it's called? Like that can,
zoonotic.
Zoonotic, that can transmit between animals and humans.
Yeah, so it's like what happens is there are lots of flu viruses circulating in pigs, for example, and humans have their own flu viruses. So what happens is a pig virus and a human virus infects the same host, and they swap a lot of genetic material. They essentially evolve really fast, and then they can spread throughout the human population. That doesn't happen with SARS-CoV-2.
Interesting.
Mainly because we don't yet know the animal reservoir. We don't know the animal source of it that directly transferred it over to humans, which means that we're probably not interacting with it a ton, the same way we are with like mass pig farming and mass poultry farming, where human farmers and animals come in contact with each other constantly. So it's not happening with SARS-CoV-2. The evolution of SARS-CoV-2 is strictly dependent on how much it can replicate, which is directly related to how much it can spread. So controlling its spread is crucial to controlling, how much of a threat it's going to be further down the evolutionary line.
Okay.
If that all makes sense.
It does. I saw something in chat here that reminded me of one very important question. This is going to be very important to everyone here in chat. Okay, everyone, all the viewers, seriously, the replay viewers too. Someone had made a comment here about Katie's email or whatever, but it reminded me of a really important question I wanted to ask. So there's this person in the drama community here that we all kind of pay attention to, Katie Joy from Without a Crystal Ball. Yeah. So here's a claim that she has made several times, but more recently has remade again and is more adamant about this. She's positive. She's sure that back in January 2020, we'll say, that she and her son had COVID. This is 2020, not 2021. They live in Minnesota, okay? That she and her son had COVID in January 2020. What is the likelihood that that would be the case? I mean, like there was no outbreak or whatever in her area. Her reasoning for why she suspects this is because she and her son were very sick, And because there's a lot of people in her area or from the nearest city in her state that are known as Hmong culture, I guess, which I guess resides near China. So that's her reasoning for it. What are the chances that that's the case?
I mean, the chances of someone having COVID in December 2020 in the US, they're pretty low.
No, yeah, it would have been December 2019, but January 2020.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It was before, it was right after it was discovered in China.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I meant. It's really low. So there is speculation that SARS-CoV-2 was circulating earlier than when we detected it, which is almost certainly the case, given what we now know about how it transmits asymptomatically.
Mm-hmm.
The handful of cases that were originally identified in Wuhan hospitals, there were likely, a lot more cases before those individuals were tested for a new virus. But how far it spread, I mean, it's really hard to say. We just don't know a ton about what the spread of SARS-CoV-2 looked like in those first few months that we know that we knew it existed. But I mean, the chances are low, but I
get that.
I can't say for certain.
Right, I get that.
Yeah, the chances are low, but I mean, I can't say for certain that you didn't have COVID in 2019 in the US. Just the scientist in me says I can't say that for certain, but the scientist in me also says you probably didn't have it. So that's what I would say.
I get it. Yeah, no, and that was pretty much my conclusion on the matter as well.
I have an anecdote about that. It was years ago, and I was sick. I was sick as crap, and I was positive I had the flu. I knew I had the flu because I was just so sick. I felt like I was run over by a truck. I went to my I saw a nurse practitioner at the time. And I went to my nurse practitioner, and she was sure that I had the flu, right? Because I was sick as crap. Okay, so she did this negative for the flu, right? And so we were both so shocked that she did the test again. I accepted that thing in my nose, in my brain again. Still negative for the flu. I mean, even my healthcare professional, and we both knew I had the flu. I did not have the flu. So no matter how sure you are of something,
right.
I just had some other crap that was, made me feel like I was been run over by a truck, and it was not the flu.
Yeah.
For me, I used the story of my ex-husband. I was convinced he was cheating on me. I was so sure of it. I mean, this was like the year 2004, I think, 2004. So I was convinced he was cheating on me, and there were reasons for my assurance. So I went out, I bought one of those devices that record phone calls. So I hook it up to our home phone, because back then people still had home phones. Wouldn't you know it? He was not cheating on me. But I would have bet my left arm, my right arm even, at the time, that he was cheating on me. But guess what? He wasn't. So
wow.
It's I'm just saying, you can be so sure of something, but it doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Never be positive.
Okay, so why don't we wrap this up with the question here that I have on the screen, because I think that this is a good way to wrap it up, and it's something that I know a lot of people are wondering, because we're all wondering, when are we going to get back to normal? So do you think there will ever be a time that COVID-19 is eradicated, and if not, what's the future going to look like with COVID-19?
Yeah, so kind of what I just talked about comes into play here too, with the animal reservoir. So we know that SARS-CoV-2 came from an animal. We know that it originally has bat origins, but we don't know which animal directly passed it to a
Right.
human.
Yeah,
Without,
there's an intermediary animal, they say?
yeah, most
Okay.
likely, yeah. Without knowing that animal reservoir, it's really hard to say whether or not it would ever be eradicated, because you would have to eliminate it in that animal source too. But
Mm.
all that is to say, the simple answer is probably not. It's probably not ever going to be eradicated. But what our future can look like with COVID-19 is, a really manageable disease where instead of, thousands of people die every single day from COVID right now, our future could look like thousands of people dying every single year from COVID-19.
Right.
And the way we get there is 100% through vaccination right now. I mean, maybe in 2020, in March and April, we could have gotten there by masking and social distancing and using lockdowns properly along with other preventatives. Maybe at that point we could have gotten to that. We could have gotten to that, like, controllable, thousands of people dying every year instead of every day
Right.
point.
Yeah.
But now, because it's so widespread, because it's all over the world and it's in our populations, we have to vaccinate. We have to slow the spread with a preventative medication like vaccination. We've done lockdowns, we've done masking, and the problem is people just don't follow the rules. People don't stick to the plan, they don't follow the rules, and that makes things like lockdowns not sustainable. We can't keep locking down every few months when COVID surges. That's just not practical. So we have to vaccinate. We have to protect our population. We have to drive cases down. Vaccination is the only way to go. But if we do that, if we vaccinate enough and we keep up, the lighter preventative measures like just wearing a mask and, not having parties with hundreds of people, we could definitely get to a point where COVID-19 is killing only a few thousand of people every year instead of every day. And that is so much more manageable than thousands of people dying every day. I mean, that's the future that we could get to if we just use the tools that we have. But we have to use them, We can't half-ass it. We can't say 2 weeks to flatten the curve and then never actually lock down. We can't say
Right.
we're all in this together and then,
Never locked down, ever.
no one actually takes the precautions. We have to use the tools effectively. And
in South Carolina, the governor literally brags that we never shut down. We never closed our state. We never shut down. While everyone else was shutting down, we took reasonable precautions, and that's not true. We took no reasonable precautions. Everybody was a required worker, and we have probably, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but in South Carolina we have probably the highest number of COVID cases currently, and the lowest vaccination rate. And our governor has actually made it illegal to have mask mandates in schools. We've lost 4 teachers. School's been back for 3 weeks. They've died. Yeah, if that wasn't clear. And he's just refusing to do anything about it. I'm gonna try and flip this thing over.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy that how
Well, I mean, it's a communicable disease, so it's going to take a community to keep it in check.
exactly.
I mean, it's and that's everyone. That's, I mean, even the entitled people among us, or the, I don't want to start pointing out groups of people, but there are quite a few entitled people, like across the political spectrum, we'll say,
Mhm.
who
Yeah.
feel or think that the rules don't apply to them or shouldn't apply to them, but they do. They must. If you want to get back to a normal, then you have to make today. You have to make the sacrifice today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, I see with with the entitled people, I see so many terrible analogies where
mm,
it's like, oh, you know, if you're vaccinated and you want me to get vaccinated, it's like thinking that if you have an umbrella out in the rain, that you're going to get wet if I don't also have an umbrella. And it's
oh
like,
yeah.
no, because it's not an infectious disease. Like,
Right.
Oh, I love the
That
the one.
birth control.
So if I don't want to get pregnant, then my neighbor has to take birth control or some shit
Yeah,
like that.
that's
Yeah.
the exact same one I was thinking of, Erin, when you
Yep.
started doing it.
oh
Yeah.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
it just misses the basic concept that this is an infectious disease where, and it's a really nasty infectious disease because it spreads asymptomatically. You peak in infectiousness of this virus just before and just after developing symptoms.
So in
And
that case, it's kind of like measles.
yeah, it's a really sneaky virus, and it's gonna be able to spread, if you're not being careful. So if you're
My
selfish
thing with
and
the personal choice people, it's like I keep saying I have no problem with your personal choice, your medical freedom, your this, that, and other. I just want consistency. So if you think that you want to be an individualist when it comes time to public health and communal responsibility, then please take that same stance when it's time. Don't demand to be included in community benefits. Don't demand to be allowed into the public schools. Don't demand to be allowed. I mean, if you're not willing to pay in, why should you take advantage of the benefits? Be an individualist or be a collectivist. Pick one. Just pick one. That's
Yeah.
my issue.
my issue is, I get personal freedom, and I think that we all have to be able to make the decision for ourselves, of course. But then, if since it's such a personal decision that you should have a right to decide for yourself, then you should keep it to yourself. There's no need for you to then start speaking on matters as though you have an authority to speak on matters and trying to convince other people to make the same choice you made for yourself. So
Yeah.
Right. Or literally going in and destroying vaccines, like has happened a couple of times here, at least in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's not freedom. That's not allowing
Right.
a choice. That's you deciding for
oh yeah,
everyone.
the abolitionists.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just going back to the whole, drunk driver analogy.
Mhm.
It's like we're all free to drive our cars, and I'm totally free to drive completely sober, with my daughter in the car whenever I want. But if some other asshole out there is just exercising their freedom to drive drunk or recklessly, and then they crash into me and affect me and my family,
Mhm.
I mean, what about my freedom? Does my
Mhm.
freedom not matter to that person? Like,
It's that you're free to swing your fist to the point
You're
that it hits my
where,
nose.
where my face begins or something like that. Yeah.
exactly.
I use
Yeah.
an analogy similar to that, Daniel or Dr. Wilson, that is like whenever they say keep your kids at home or you stay home if you're afraid I'm going to live my life. And like, we don't tell sober people to stay off the roads if they're afraid of drunk people on the roads.
Yeah.
We lock up drunk drivers. You
Mhm.
are the drunk driver in this situation. You are the one putting people at risk. You stay off the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And scientifically, it the whole idea of if you're sick, you stay home, that completely misses the science that we now know that SARS-CoV-2 spreads before you get symptoms.
Right. And
So
do a lot of things.
yeah. It's just like it's a basic misunderstanding of science. Is what I hope that's all that is.
No,
See,
I'm
some
too
of it
optimistic, but I know there are other things.
willful.
I have a
Like-
theory. I have a theory on this. Now, Amber, I think, has already heard this theory. But okay. Years ago, you remember the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Remember
Yeah.
that show?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Well, when this show was really big, like back in the 90s, I think it was like early mid 90s, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
a really big show. So at that time, though, the network or the producers behind the show had this idea, let's film it around the world. So they started like this, going from country to country, filming episodes of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Well, for the most part, they had no issues doing this, except for Russia. Now, they had this one issue come up in Russia, but the rate in which it was happening, it couldn't have just been an anomaly. Basically, on the Ask an Audience or Ask the Audience Lifeline, the audience was overwhelmingly answering incorrectly. Like not just the audience as a whole, but the number of individuals answering the question incorrectly was like no, there was a reason behind it. This was not happening organically. So they started to poll the audience members, asking them, "Did you answer this incorrectly? And if you did you do this on purpose, and why?" So what they learned was, yeah, they did answer the question incorrectly, and the reason why they did this is because everyone else was so poor, so destitute that they were not going to sit by and watch someone have some good fortune. So they were just sabotaging the contestants' chance at obtaining money or whatever.
Wow.
So now, mind you, this was Russia, like just a few years after the fall of the Soviet Union. Okay, this is 1990s Russia. So that I always thought stood out to me because I feel like that in the United States, this explains the kind of thinking in a lot of pockets throughout the United States, like the more poor sections, the more rural sections even. That they just don't want to see, like the people who fight against entitlements, who in the same breath will say don't trust the government or whatever else, or don't trust them in their medical problems or their medical advice, but then demand to be taken care of, or the people who demand that the government help them in times of need, but then actively fight against entitlements. So but I feel like that's what it is. Just so many people don't want to see others, just do well or do better even. So they're trying to sabotage things in any turn they can.
That's so trolly to just give mostly wrong answers and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
I never thought of it that way.
I feel like human nature,
so
you would
sad.
want to help. Like you would want to see someone else do well, especially if you are down and out. Like, to me, I mean, they do tests on this and stuff for empathy and like, wow, I'm shocked. I cannot believe that.
But I mean, that's why I point out. I think it's important to remember this was 1990s Russia. It was that country went through a lot of shit after the Soviet Union broke up. I mean, there were a lot of hardships. But I find it funny, not funny, haha, funny, just funny that the mentality in parts of the U.S. today could possibly be comparable to 1990s Russian mentality.
It's ironic.
Yeah. So
when the people that are barely above the poverty line are saying to get rid of the additional federal benefits for unemployment because the lazy people need to get off their asses and work. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like you're $1 short from being there yourself.
Yeah.
Like
like one broken leg away from being there yourself.
Right.
Exactly.
Your life would be over if anything, God forbid, you broke anything or were sick or fell off a ladder or what. You would not be able to pay your bills. You would be in the exact same situation, and you can't even envision that, like to have empathy at all.
Yeah,
I will never understand that. I'm a very empathetic person, though. So
okay, so we're coming up in 2 hours here. So I'm going to end this stream for now. I'm to people in chat. I am going to come back in about an hour. There's a couple of things I need to do around the house and like take my dog for a walk and whatnot. Because it's only 10 o'clock here. So, but
one thing real
and
quick,
I know.
did you address how Dr. Malone was not the inventor of mRNA?
Oh yeah, we went over that.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. Obviously, like Dr. Wilson, I know he has a newborn baby. Well, maybe not quite a newborn anymore, a little bit more of a baby, but
she's asleep. She's still sleeping.
Oh,
right. But I mean, but morning comes,
Yes, yeah.
So
congratulations.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
God, I miss those years.
What's that?
What'd you say?
I miss those years.
Oh God, no. I mean,
Yeah,
they're great when they're there, but
I'm looking forward to having a little talking thing running around.
You think that?
Yeah.
I know. It'll be all different challenges, and I'll miss when she's just laying there and I don't have to chase her. But
yeah.
Yeah, I remember my mom telling me that because I used to, my oldest, I was like, I can't wait till he starts walking. I'm trying to push him to walk. And my mom's like, trust me, the day that he starts to walk, you're going to long for these days.
I
Was she
know.
right?
I have 4 boys. It's something. And they're all like, well, the 3 youngest are really close together. So.
Wow. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
You're a super mom. I don't know how you do it.
Yes, but one of them flipped me off earlier, so I'm not doing that.
Oh, nice.
He's 5.
He's 5.
He's 5. It was brilliant. He was like,
where do you learn that?
Yeah, I have no idea.
See what you have to look forward to? Yeah, I remember that. I remember the first "fuck you, Mom." I remember that.
All right, you guys have a fantastic night.
Yes, thank you both for joining, and thank you, Dr. Wilson, for giving us a couple hours of your time here and to answer a lot of these. Pretty much all the questions I had, I think you answered.
Oh,
so
I missed the opportunity for the evolution joke. You were talking about evolution, and I was going to say something about you can't prove evolution outside of a bacteria. Was it? I saw your thing with the Jesus guy.
Oh my God! Oh, that was interesting.
That was good. I like that.
That was an interesting debate. Yeah. That was fun.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy talking about this stuff and answering questions, and I'm very flattered and blown away that I get to do this just because I started a YouTube channel. So.
Well, that's awesome. I'm very glad that you started a YouTube channel. Yeah, it is. It's a good one. So
appreciate it.
But yeah, and until next time, because there very well may be a next time. We'll see.
Oh.
I'm definitely going to ask anyways. So,
bye.
But thank you very much, though, both of you. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
All right. Thanks.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye.